It is 5:30. I will call this work session to order. Up first, we have Southwest Transit, the new CEO, introduction and services discussion.
Yeah, I think before I dip into this, maybe we could go around and do introductions for Eric. So I'll start. Brett Merrick, City Manager.
Lynn Schutte, Finance Director.
Chad Shell, Public Services Director.
Vicki Sunzeiden, City Clerk.
Rigo up, City Council.
Courtney Johnson, Mayor.
Lori Sayer, City Council.
Christy Mock, City Council.
Aaron Schmidt, Assistant City Engineer.
And Eric Bershman, City Council.
And Mayor, do you want to?
Yeah? Do you want to participate? It's completely optional. You don't have to. Nobody's ever said no, but you don't have to.
Nobody's ever said
Nobody's
no.
declined. The sheriff played it.
It's difficult for me because I have a lot of more truths that I could add. I'm trying to think of what the appropriate, lie would be. Why don't we tee up Brent first? Okay. Tee up Brent first.
Okay.
And I need to write this down. Tee up Brent first on his thing, and then when he turns it over to me, we'll play the game.
Okay. Outstanding.
So happy to welcome Eric Hansen, the new CEO of Southwest Transit. And so just so we can all kind of see from this same sheet of music, I just wanted to kind of give a brief background into the city's history with transit, Carver Station, etc. So in 2010, the city, Carver was awarded what's called the CMAQ, or Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Grant from the federal government, just over $4 million. And we use that to buy the land, construct, and then do related infrastructure improvements for Carver Station. So think Ironwood Drive, Hartwell to the south, north and south Hartwell Drive, water and sanitary sewer, the signals at Ironwood Drive, and that really kind of paved the way for the Carver County CDA to do a project there, the original landowners, or not, excuse me, the previous landowners. And so that kind of paved its way into the development of Copper Hills. So they sold part of their property. I think it was, the development was Mattamy at the time for M&I Homes. And then, as you know, they put together part of their development project for what's known as Carver Crossing, and then they're coming in, actually have an application in for another apartment project. And so their development project in turn paid the city's match for that construction grant. The city was also awarded just over $750,000 in fixed bus service, what we call the operations grant. And so we have a 20% match. With that, the city has already dedicated those funds to pay for that. And through that, we were able to provide our first bus service out of Carver Station in 2015 from Southwest Transit with service to Minneapolis and then the University of Minnesota. In 2016, Southwest Transit rolled out their Prime service, that on-demand local transit service, or what folks in the business are now calling micro-transit. So the service wasn't previously connected to any grant awards the city had, and so at the time I think Southwest was just trying to develop kind of a network or business model for this new type of transit in the Southwest area. In 2018, after some momentum was built, Southwest requested that the city of Carver and Victoria contract to continue Prime service. If you remember, for some of you, at the time, the council took some time, or a couple months, to deliberate over that. And then in March of 2019, the council approved a contract for Prime and then what's called Prime MP, which is dedicated service to medical providers at a $10 trip charge to the city. And then most recently, the city approved a renewed contract in 2022 to continue Prime and Prime MD at $12 per trip charge. But made a decision to exclude Prime Edge and Prime MSP service to the airport from that service contract. And so with Eric starting his new role at the Southwest, we wanted to introduce him to the council and then give him an opportunity to share some perspectives not only on the bus service, but Prime service and opportunities to connect and collaborate with what has been a great partner in Southwest Transit. So with that, Eric, take it away.
I'm ready.
All right,
Okay,
let's hear it.
here we go. 3 things about me. 1, I taught middle school social studies. 2, I grew up on a farm in southern Minnesota. And 3, I am a cancer survivor. Eric might know some of these things, so maybe he shouldn't say it.
I'll just,
Are we guessing the lies? Is that what we're
Yeah,
guessing?
yeah.
Okay. I can't tell what the
Okay,
consensus
so-
is. How does this work?
Well, generally I'll do a summary. A lot of people don't think you taught middle school, but there's one for everything, really. You've got a school.
Wow, that's all over the board.
Yeah.
No consensus?
Yeah,
Okay.
consensus.
I did teach middle school social studies
All right.
for 2 years at an Orthodox Jewish school in Denver, Colorado.
Wow.
So that's interesting. I did not grow up on a farm in southern Minnesota. I did grow up on a farm in southern Iowa.
Oh.
So that's kind of a tricky one. That's a tricky one. And I am a cancer survivor.
Wow.
So,
Outstanding. Well, thank
Yep.
you for
Yeah.
humoring us and playing along.
well, thank you for making me a part of it. Took me a couple minutes to process it, so I appreciate the extra information. I have a quick handout, actually. I just thought I'd go over some numbers and some interesting little things. I'll let you go that way with it. I've got my copy that I wrote out on the back anyway, so. But for the city of Carver specifically, I think Brent gave a pretty good synopsis of kind of where things are, but I wanted to pull some information about how many people have been utilizing the service, first of all. Through this year through October, 2,526 prime rides and 1,195 express bus rides, and you can kind of see the trend in the chart, below that. So that's how many people have been utilizing the service, through this year, essentially. The interesting one is bullet number 2, which is where are people going with Prime? Some of the data that we have is, more general than that, but if it's a more common destination, it's kind of something that we track a little bit more carefully. But a good percentage of people, about 38%, are just going to Chaska, somewhere in Chaska. And that maybe isn't terribly surprising. But it's interesting to see that you've got the second biggest donation is the Walmart in Eden Prairie. And then, there's some other interesting ones kind of towards the bottom, like Ridgeview Medical Center in Waconia and Lakeview Industries in Chaska. That's a assembly factory of some sort. And Eden Prairie Mall is on that list. Cornerstone Village is a 55-plus community. And the Target in Chaska. So you can kind of get a sense for what people are using the service for. The last bullet is just a piece of information. So it costs Southwest Transit about $10,000 a month to run the service for you. That's $120,000 a year. The $12 that you provide is about $35,000. So in reality, we're putting about $90,000 a year into it. It amounts to about $42 a ride. Eric knows we're having kind of a current discussion on, well, how much does Prime cost? And what we know, I think generally speaking, is that the further out you go, the more that it costs, right? So when you add in the $12 subsidy to get it to $29, our kind of core Prime service costs something in the roughly low $30 range. The things that cost us a lot more are, not surprisingly, going to the airport and things like that. And so we're kind of having a large discussion on the commission right now about, okay, what exactly is our service level? Where are we going to go? How far are we going to go? Because what I can tell you in general is that the express bus service downtown, in terms of riders on the system-wide, is about down 75%. It's about 25% of what it was pre-pandemic. There's some data that the census tracks about how many people are working at home. And, you know, in Carver County and generally in our area, you know, it peaked at 35, almost 40% of people working at home. And, you know, and it's come down since then, you know, but we still have 20-some% of people as opposed to pre-pandemic where it was much less than 10% were working at home or hybrid. And so you have a lot of people that maybe don't need to take the bus anymore. The other interesting thing is that, of course, our communities are getting older. Eden Prairie, for example, has about 3 times as many seniors in it than it did. And so what that means, those people if they're retired, don't have a reason to go downtown either. So kind of part of our discussion is, well, you know, what's the future ultimately, you know, of Southwest Transit? It certainly includes some on-demand service like this with Prime. It includes Express Bus, but what's the mix? You know, how is that funded? What does that look like? You know, what kind of technologies does it include? How do we make it more efficient for people? You know, things like that. So, you know, a couple of key takeaways. I mean, this is how you know, how many people we're servicing. But, you know, even the $12 that we receive is appreciated, but it doesn't cover the cost of the whole service, is what it amounts to.
Where does the rest of that funding come from?
Motor vehicle sales tax, and that is allocated on a percentage basis based on a formula that the state legislature created 20 years ago. So we get a certain amount of that's generated as a direct allocation. It was created 20 years ago based on kind of the populations, Eden Prairie, Chan, and Chanhaska at that time, Chanhassen and Chaska at that time, or otherwise known as Chanhaska.
I like the match.
I got it.
Chanhaska, that's the greater Chanhaska region. And so it probably isn't representative of where we are today, but ultimately the motor vehicle sales tax that we receive doesn't include any of the motor vehicle sales tax paid for by anybody from Carver or Victoria or any of the other communities that we also serve. So essentially the taxpayers in those communities are subsidizing the cost of the service to Carver, candidly. I think that's...
Wait, can you say that? The motor vehicle sales tax that we pay?
No, the motor vehicle sales tax that people in Eden Prairie, Chan, and Chaska are paying is essentially helping to subsidize the cost of this service to Carver. I don't think that's a bad thing, but I just want you to know that in the context of what we provide.
Is that because the current state funding didn't include Carver as one of the?
That's correct. That's correct. And if that changed, that obviously changes, things to a certain extent. But this is something we obviously want to continue to do. But as Eric knows, because he's seen me in a few board meetings, I have a tendency to kind of come at things from the standpoint of, this is the facts of the situation. So, okay, what do we do now? Ultimately. And because, my intent, ultimately it'll be the board's decision, but my intent is to continue to grow Southwest Transit. We had some really good conversations today with Carver County about how we might be able to provide some additional services. And I think there's some really good partnerships, that we could kind of all do together to try to address some of these things. Because it's important to know, these numbers, because at the end of the day, trying to figure out, well, how do we provide transit, which is, I think, is an important service for people that need it, in your community and our communities. We need to know what we're dealing with here. And so ultimately, that's kind of, where we're coming from on that. This is kind of the state of the nation, I guess you could say, for transit service in Carver. In terms of what we provide. So we're grateful for the partnership for sure. And for Eric's presence, he does a really good job a lot of times reminding people that we provide service to Carver, because I think sometimes people, our other commissioners say that. We provide service to Victoria too, for that matter. So under the similar contract.
Eric, do you have any data related to why these people are using transit? Is it recreation? I mean, like Walmart, people could be going there to shop, or they could be going there to work. Do you ever ask those kinds of questions or mine that data?
We have we don't know, there's a couple of things we do know. We do a survey to current riders, and we have a sense for, what they're using it for, but I don't have any specific data just for Carver.
Okay.
So let me dig out that survey. The other thing that's also true that Eric will see on Saturday is that we did a survey of all of the communities, and we included some people in Carver and some people in Victoria, as well as our other 3 core cities in that survey as well, because we serve those areas. And so we'll have a better sense for just how the general population feels about transit and whether they want to use it, what they might use it for. But it's going to be hard to drill down on Carver because there just won't be a very big number in that. But when we have that, I'll certainly share that with Brent, and he can disseminate it. And Eric will see it on Saturday at our retreat. He can disseminate it to the rest of the council. And you better get a better answer to that question.
Okay.
Can we talk a little bit about some of the changes that are coming to Prime that we've talked about in our council meeting? Specifically, the airport.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that the airport is from a cost standpoint, it costs us about $75 or $80 to send people to the airport one way, and that's with a $10 fare, not a $5 fare. And so we have a grant, and we're going to ultimately kind of turn that into a fixed route service. So there'll be a bus, a smaller bus to the airport from Southwest Station, which actually is a benefit to Carver, because theoretically you could take a Prime from here to Southwest Station and then take a bus then to the airport. And right now, according to your service agreement, you can't go directly from your house to the airport. But that airport service represents about, I looked at it today, about 5% of our total ride system-wide and roughly about 10% of our costs. So it costs us twice as much as you would normally. So there's a number of things that we're doing to reduce, to create some more efficiencies. And this is actually something that's really, that the commission has asked for, and also this is something that's important to me personally, and that is that we ought to be making fact-based, data-driven kind of decisions about, what we do about things like service levels. And I was a city administrator before this and worked in local government a long time, and a lot of times these are the kinds of service level discussions you have, right? I mean, can I afford to do this, or can I afford to do that, or do we do this differently because it's more efficient, and and things like that. And what I know is that the pandemic has kind of changed the way that we view transit, and so we're in the middle of kind of figuring out what our next move is, I guess you could say. I think it's exciting because there's a lot of opportunity here. I don't know why we couldn't capitalize on some of that, and so that's what we're planning to do.
So you're throwing around the idea of having the airport one run out of the Chaska station, or
Out of
it
Eden
will?
Prairie, yeah,
Or
it
Eden
will,
Prairie.
it will. I just don't know when it's gonna happen exactly, because we do have a grant we've already received for vehicles and operations for that. The challenge we have with vehicles, like a lot of other things, is that we're slower to get them than we should be these days. And so we were supposed to already have the vehicles today, but those vehicles are now scheduled. We're hoping to get them by the end of next year. And so it's just been really rough, on that kind of stuff, as you probably heard in other ways.
So we'd be running multiple ones per day then out of Eden Prairie, or is it?
The service
in the
is
morning,
designed.
one
The
at night.
service is designed to be every 30 minutes. So you'd have basically a trip every 30 minutes out of Southwest Station in Eden Prairie to the airport, and it would include stops at least Normandale Community College and Mall of America, and probably another couple of cross stops, so you could connect to a metro bus or something like that going in a different direction. But that's how the service is designed. As far as the hours, we haven't determined when it would start and when it would end, but that's how the grant is written.
And how long
Every 30
is that
minutes.
grant supposed to last then? How long do you foresee, how many years?
I think it's 3, but don't hold me to that number. I think that's right, though. Yeah. But I'm guessing, well, we can't start that service on the grant until we receive the vehicles, which we're hoping to get next year. So I don't know exactly, when it's going to start. And one of the questions we have is, can we start it early without the vehicles? but I don't wanna, no, when I
Are you-
know that sounds funny.
I know what you mean.
I mean, other vehicles other than the ones that we are getting for the grant, because there's operational dollars, but if I do that, I don't wanna start the project and then have to say, well, you started the project before you were ready, and so therefore we're not gonna reimburse you for that. So that's what I'm trying to avoid at this point, so I don't know for sure yet.
Do you have any idea how long of a trip that would be with the stops?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. We haven't done that route scheduling yet. It roughly would be 30 minutes because it's designed to be a 30-minute headway. So the idea would be 30 minutes down and 30 minutes back, but that's going to be depending on traffic. But that'd be about right.
From Eden Prairie.
From Eden Prairie, not from here. It'd be from here longer. But
With
yeah.
stops?
With stops, yeah.
So then what happens when the grant runs out?
Well, then we would have to make a decision. Do we want to keep doing it or not? You know, and a lot of it is going to be dependent on, you know, ridership and what makes sense. But, you know, this is part of what we're trying to figure out is what does service look like for Southwest Transit? For basically 15 years, we basically had one service, you know, which is just an express bus downtown, and that's it. And then we kind of added in, you know, Prime, you know, in some of these kinds of, you know, timeframes, you know, 15, 16, something like that. But in 2019, you know, Prime was like 10% of our service. We were 90% express bus, and now today we're 40% Prime and 60% express bus. I mean, that's a big change. And that's.
Do you think, can I ask you something? Do you
Sure.
think that's in part because we're continuing to fund and then add funding to the Prime services, where before you had the choice to take the bus when it was these times and stop at these places. Now that it's here, are out of convenience, right? Out of convenience and having, we're not in an economically depressed area for the most part out here, so people can afford to say, I'll just take this.
More transit dependent people than you think. And that number's growing, you know, because you're talking about seniors in many cases that are going to be more transit dependent. And the demographics are shifting quite a bit. Not so much here, but, you know, further east in the service area that we provide. But I would say in general, why is this changing this way? I mean, it's a combination of things. I think some of it is just a lot less express bus than it used to because people are working at home. That's a big driving factor. I think the demographics are changing. I have a personal suspicion, but this is just speculation on my part, that there was probably always a demand for it, a need for it, but we weren't providing it because we didn't know that need was there, you know? It was designed to kind of try to gain back some of that ridership that we lost from the express piece. But that's kind of speculation on my part. But I think that it's going to continue to grow in need, which is why we've got to figure out how to be more efficient with it, because it's not sustainable at some of these larger numbers. But as you know, I think that we can get that number down in some of our core services, shorter distances. It's much more cost effective, and so that's what we've got to figure out how to make this, you know, partly how to make this work.
When that grant runs out, is the intent to have that turn into something like Prime?
Turn into
The
something
pricing,
like-
you know, where the city would pay for part of it.
Well, we're going to have that conversations. You know, that's going to be a continuing conversation. I mean, what I told Brant the last time we met is that, you know, let's kind of keep things, you know, where we're at the moment, but we need to have some conversations about it. We had a meeting with some Carver County staff today, and what I suggested to them is that we ought to apply for they're going to have a call for regional projects in the spring, you know, through the TAB, the MPO and the Met Council, and I think that we ought to apply for some service expansions for Prime in Carver County, and I think we ought to include, you know, places like the city of Carver and Victoria and things like that in it, because it adds some density and that's good, but it's also potentially another way to subsidize that service. I think that might be interested in doing something like that because we already have a grant that is going to expand our prime service into Minnetonka and Hopkins and places like that. And so I don't know why this wouldn't make sense too. But that's just an idea at this point. The other idea that we're looking at the moment is something along the lines of kind of zone-based fares. So the further you go away, the more you might pay. And so maybe it's not a $5 ride out of Carver, maybe it's a $10 ride out of Carver. Or if you're in Carver, it's $5, but maybe if you go outside a certain amount, it's a little bit more. So we're going to play around with that a little bit. A lot of other places are doing that. So there's a lot of different things that we're going to try, things that are just teed up for me to try to figure out how to make this more cost effective. I'm sure at least some, if not all, of these things are going to work to some extent. So this is partly what we're trying to figure out at the moment. But it's changed, and COVID changed the whole world, and it changed transit in a big way. And you're seeing the effect of that now, and now we're just trying to respond and figure out how we deal with it.
Yeah, I just had a quick, so with the light rail theoretically finishing sometime, do you expect to see the big change in the express service downtown?
That's a $1 million question.
More.
An assumption that
There people have different opinions about that. Some people are like, well, people will choose the bus because it's quicker. Or people won't choose the bus because they like trains better. I like to think of it a little bit differently. I think that you're actually potentially going to create more synergy between the two, and so I think your ridership overall will grow. Because I think people take the bus downtown for different reasons than they might take the train. The train is going to run at different hours. It's going to run more extended hours. We're primarily just running during the morning and evening rush kind of situations. And so I think that they complement each other. So my hope, and we're certainly going to prepare this way, is that it will be synergistic and actually grow it. We have another grant as well to provide first and last mile service around that with our prime. And actually we're looking at, this is new information for you, but we're talking to some people about maybe some of that might even be autonomous vehicles as well. And so I think that there's an opportunity to grow both of it, but
you don't know until it happens.
You never know until it happens. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a couple kind of financial pieces. One that was sparked from a conversation that Dana Hardy from Victoria and I had with Eric is this, the state increased sales tax by 0.75%.
Yep.
And so I connected with, so Carver County is getting that money, and I connected with Dave Hemsey, the county administrator, and just kind of advocated for a concept to explore regarding kind of in line with what you mentioned about making prime a bigger service component within the county and partnering cities. And there's some potential legislation that would perhaps earmark part of that sales tax to cities. Right now it just goes to the county. So in the end, a potential revenue source to fund prime. The other thing that we talked about briefly was at some point, and this doesn't have to necessarily align with the end of our operations grant on the fixed bus service, but eventually the council's likely going to want to explore and have a discussion with the Southwest Transit Board on, do you join Southwest Transit? I think the pain point has been through our budget discussions is that we fund prime out of our general fund, our general property tax levy, where Chaska, Chanhassen, and Eagan Prairie fund it from their motor vehicle sales tax contributions. And in the end, there's a lot of moving parts to that. I'm making something that's very complex, very simple.
It's very complex.
Just because of how that funding is generated, the methodology used is based on populations from the year 2000, where Carver was 1,200 in 2000, compared to close to 7,000 now. And so, but I just want to introduce kind of big picture concepts that might influence how you approach this as we go into 2024, and having the kinds of conversations that are probably needed in kind of both areas.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we need to do is explain to the stakeholders the need, you know, not just the demand, which you can see, people are using the services, right? But also the need in the context of, you know what, this is what the services are costing, we think this is a good value. I can tell you, because I looked at the numbers today, and I shared them with some of the Carver County staff today, that through the 0.75 sales tax that you just talked about, the estimate from the Met Council is that Carver County is going to receive $7 million plus a year. That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
And we're not talking about chump change here. And they're getting a relatively small share, you know, compared to some of them. I mean, the Met Council as a whole is going to get 300 and some million just next year. So it's a lot of money. So I think that it'd be worth having that discussion. My suspicion is that they're just now starting at the county to realize what this is, right? And so if we can partner with us and Carver, City of Carver, and Victoria, and other communities, you know, and kind of create a program, you know, for Carver County, and potentially, you know, partner with maybe some grants through the Met Council. You know, I think I'd rather be ahead of that and be proactive, because I think it addresses could address some of the funding issues, you know, that are necessary, and maybe have less of a burden on your tax levy. And I do understand that. I mean, I was a city administrator in a small city, and so I know how people feel about the tax levy. So I get that.
Is that sales tax earmarked for transportation, meaning it could be roads and bridges too, or transit?
It has a bunch of things that it's earmarked for. My belief is that general transportation is not one of them. Transit is specifically earmarked in that. And correct me if I'm wrong on that, Brent, but I believe that's correct.
Or when I connected with Dave Hemsey about it, he had transferred the project over to Lyndon Robjet, who's the Carver County Engineer, Public Works Director, and so he's working on building a concept plan, because at the time Dave didn't know if, you know, what the ratio would be, or if there are required ratios between, you know, roads and bridges and transit, if you will. And so in the end, there's an opportunity this year that we didn't have the year before, and so we'll sort through that and give you updates as they're available.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions? All right, Eric.
Thank you
Thank
for
you
your
for
time.
coming.
I
Thank you
appreciate it.
for
Have a good meeting
humouring us.
tonight.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Rick. I'll see you Saturday.
You betcha.
All right, item number 3, speed zone discussion for Ironwood Drive. Playing the role of Dan Manis tonight is Eric.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you. Get plugged in here quick. Okay, so just to kind of kick things off, kind of the impetus of the request here. So there was a resident request that came through inquiring about this school speed zone reduction. So what we did is we took that request, ran it through our traffic folks, and MnDOT actually has a new guide for how these school speed zones are established. And this guide is kind of a new streamlined process, so it made things a little bit easier to implement these things. So that's a good thing. I guess in summary, Ironwood Drive is a 30-mile-an-hour road today, and what we're proposing is a reduction of 10 miles an hour. So it would go down to 20 miles per hour during AM drop-off and PM pickup. So with the existing speed limit of 30 miles an hour and only a 10-mile-an-hour reduction, there isn't a full engineering and traffic study required to implement such a change. So that's also a benefit. So based on the new traffic that's going to be coming from Timber Creek and anything to the west in the future, we think this is a good idea, and we're recommending that the council should consider it. So It's a pretty easy implementation. It adds a couple signs kind of both for westbound and eastbound. So you can see on the screen here, it basically says, school speed zone limit is 20. It has the hours in which those limits apply, Monday through Friday. And it's really as simple as that. So public services would be able to install those signs should you choose to move forward with this. And Chad can speak to any of that timing, but it's, again, this is a pretty easy one, I think. So happy to answer any questions and have any discussion now, but that's what we're seeing, and we think it's a good idea, so. Questions?
I agree that it's a good idea. Any questions?
Can we have any kind of electronic lighting of the signs during the period of time like we do in the other?
That's a good question. So you're saying
So on the
JCP?
right. So during those hours, there's an alert that you're in those hours.
Mhm.
Is there anything we can do similarly?
I believe there's another sign you can add like while flashing, and there'd be like a flashing beacon on that during those hours. So that would be one option. It would make the installation a little more complex, but I think that is an option that could be considered.
Do we think that's important?
I
I feel like it's a little less important in that that's more of a, compared to County Road 11, more of a side street,
Okay.
right? And given just the stoplight, it's kind of hard to get up to speed there. If you're driving on that street during school time, you're probably pretty aware, given all of the traffic, that it's school's in session or not.
I think the same. It's on County Road 11. I think that's really important. I think that we might be okay without them on that side.
And I can live with that, but I just wanted to.
I think it could be an upgrade if we hear feedback that those signs aren't doing the trick, but it's such a small area, and I do think just by proximity, you know that school's taking place.
And the nice thing about this, is that, that's a posted speed, that's enforceable, so, that, if you get the enforcement out there properly, that maybe that's a good place to start, see
Maybe
how
the
it
first
goes.
couple days of school, just.
Well, no,
And-
we're not gonna wait, this would go up.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm saying, how about?
What I
police
guess
officers?
what I was saying is, start with the signs as is, and if it doesn't seem to be working, I think you could look at doing the flashing beacon on top of it, but like I said, that's gonna be a lot more involved, to make that happen.
We usually put some kind of flag over the sign for a little while to kind of alert folks that there's been a signage change, right?
Yes, there's a orange or pink fluorescent flag that goes on the new signs.
That's fine.
Yeah.
We're likely probably into the spring by the time, so the council would approve this on the 20th. Then to order the signs might be into December, so you might be dealing with frost issues. Is that fair to
Yes.
say, Chad? So,
Yes.
I would suspect spring of the year. And not that it's a terrible amount of money, but the plan would be to use part of our public safety funding that we received in 2024 to get this done.
Well, I support the idea. I like the idea of starting with what's being presented, knowing we could add. And I'm not familiar with like the order of these things happening. Is the school need to be like, are they? I would think they would support it, but is there any?
We've been, I've been in contact throughout this process with Ryan Finke, who's the principal,
Okay.
and so they've been supportive of the concept.
Okay.
Yeah, I like it if we can get the signs in sooner rather than later. I don't know if we can put placeholder signs in there or.
Spring.
Well, I mean, they can dig basements in the middle of winter. What does it take to get one in on the side of the road for a sign?
I don't know if our machine can actually pound the post through the frost.
Okay.
It may be possible.
Okay.
The alternative too is you could, if we had locations, we could just pound the posts in now and then put the signs up once they're here.
Yeah.
That seems like a good idea. Look at that, Brent, all construction minded here. I would like to see Brent out there getting up.
Lead about probably 6 length of Telspar.
Yep. There you go.
Pictures where it didn't happen, Chad.
Business jargon term.
Yeah, that's good.
I think we're good. Good on that?
Awesome, yep, so we'll bring this to the meeting on the 20th for approval, so.
Super.
Good.
All right, while we're talking about signs, let's talk about no parking on Churchill Drive.
Okay, let us talk about Cruchy Hill Drive.
Let us. Very formal.
Yeah, so, this is an issue that, staff has observed, I'm sure many of you have seen, being in this area when events are occurring at Community Park, during the summer. And it's really, I guess it's become more of a public services and fire department safety issue, I'll call it. In that when that street is lined with cars on both sides, the fire department actually has a difficult time getting through there and getting to the incident in a short amount of time. So they've in talking with Callie about it, they've had to like kind of divert around this area at times. So what we did is we kind of talked about this at a staff level, engineering, public services, fire, and we came up with a few findings and recommendations that we want to share. So first, from an engineering perspective, just pure engineering, Curchie Hill Drive is a 32-foot street, so it does meet the minimum requirements for parking on both sides. So that was our first finding. The second finding is obviously there's been significant parking, like with events that happen during the summer at Community Park. It seems like it's seasonal when there's games and such happening at the park. And then, like I just mentioned, the fire department physically has issues getting their apparatus through there. So we came up with this recommendation that's shown here. So what we're suggesting is that you could post no parking on the north side of the road, just from basically April 15th through September 15th, when that parking issue has been noticed. Those signs they could stay up all year because they're posted only for that time of the year. But we feel this would be a sustainable solution if the council would want to pursue that. So.
Remind me, what brought this forward? Was it residents or was it fire department?
Residents.
How many do you,
We got 2 complaints, or not complaints, but sign requests, and so this is our process to review that, but.
So there's,
I also feel like it's not the first year.
Correct.
so just anecdotally, when Jonathan Carver Parkway was shut down, and this was the route that the fire department would take to get to events north of the city, they did post on that side of the road, no parking, because it was an issue. When there's an event in Community Park, it's oftentimes frustrating because the Community Park proper parking lot can be pretty empty, but folks will park because I think at CCYBSA, I think they've got a lot of events, especially for the littler kids,
out in the field?
on more of the east side of Community Park. So it's not the most direct route to park in the parking lot. This came from 2 residents, but the neighborhood ladies text chain, I heard from a lot more folks about what an issue it is. And, you oftentimes either have to pull into a driveway or go into kind of that little half cul-de-sac on the west side, because otherwise you're playing chicken with a minivan of somebody who's coming or going from not that it's only minivans, but it's just real narrow in there with parking on both sides of the street.
What do we need for clearance?
Yeah.
Not that we're changing the street, but so that we don't have these issues.
Yeah.
Do we?
Did cars get wider?
No, so I
Fire
think
trucks
the
do.
issue is, so your standard residential street, parking on both sides, 32 feet. You'll have a car parked kind of here, there, you're able to kind of maneuver, but when you have just 2 rows of cars the whole way, it just becomes so tight
Sure.
that it's very
That
Yeah,
difficult.
if you drive through there tonight, and I welcome you all to do that, you'll see maybe a half a dozen cars parked on the street, probably like any of our streets,
yeah,
right?
gotcha.
And they tend to be, just happen to be staggered.
Sure. That makes sense.
Erin, I have a question. I see the 12 by 6 and one 12 by 18. I imagine that's the dimensions of the sign.
Yes, that's correct.
No, what is the one on the top, the most north? On the very top it says 12 by 18.
12 by 18.
And then it says 12 by 6 on the bottom.
So the 12 by 18 sign is the one with the no parking with the air, the slash through it, April 15th through September 15th. So that sign would be 18 inches tall.
Oh, okay, so
Or
it's
12
two
inches
signs.
wide.
And then a little
And on the
one
panel below it will say this side up street.
Okay.
So that would be a sign that's like this big.
I have to say, even if it's just concept, I appreciate knowing that because I know when some other times when we've wanted to put like no parking, that's always one of the questions, like,
Oh,
how big is that
sure.
sign gonna be?
Okay.
That seems very reasonable.
So is the September 15 date, how did we pick that? Because the CCYBSA in itself is usually done by mid-August. And then I know there's did a Black Sox play that late or?
We got some feedback from the team that Steamboat Days is an issue, and so they wanted to run it through at least the Steamboat Days weekend, so that's how we landed on the 15th of September.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Oh, I see, okay, just for people parking to walk down the hills? And like there's only, with the softball tournament's like 1 day, but there's
Well, I
not
think
really
they're
enough
talking,
people there.
was it the softball tournament?
It was more the parade, feedback
Oh,
we've heard
sure.
about the parade.
Okay.
And we think these residents, other than the 2 that complained, are amenable to this.
So
I
our,
let everybody know via the text chain, and everybody seemed to.
so our intent would be to mail this concept out and invite folks to the November 20th meeting. And if we'd send out whatever you wanted to have sent out for the concept, if it's these dates or based on you saying you want to move this forward.
I'd actually be open to having it say October 15th, just to, because the fields might start getting used for more things, or I mean, some of these soccer
I
and other
would,
things
because
are
there's no
slow.
lights.
Oh, there's
So
no
it's
lights,
dark
so-
by, because Steamboat Days, we put the fireworks off at 8:15 and that's the beginning of September.
Okay.
That's a good point.
So yeah, there won't be much past that.
My only other reason was, just to be consistent, so it's like 6 months, or I don't know enough like what we call our other seasonal things, and I also should probably have that more in my mind because, later we'll talk about the, Public Works schedule, and like them having, they used to have seasonal hours, but now it's possible that'll just be a year-round thing.
I'm okay with September, I think that's
Okay.
sufficient, I think.
Yeah, I mean, kids are back in school, right, so you're during the weekday.
I forgot about the lighting too.
Yeah,
September makes sense.
And then there's still parking for the residents on the other side of the street, right? I mean, this is generally just trying to keep the peak parking down, right?
Yep, so it'll be parking on the opposite side, on the south side.
With the sidewalk, which makes
Yeah.
sense theoretically, right?
Looks good.
Looks good to me.
All right, you have what you need from us?
I do.
Great. Awesome. Item number 5, the recreation partnership renewal, Mr. Mark.
Yeah, so wanted to include this in the packet, but got this today, so I'll get on this. Brenda Good put this together with help from the folks at Chaska, so just a refresher on some of the programs and some new data related to that. So essentially, the council last approved the renewal of our recreation partnership through a memorandum of understanding with the city of Chaska. So it provides resident rate reciprocity at the community center, curling center, and town course. It also provides some various recreation and community programming here in the city. And so that MOU expired at year's end, so we've been working on developing an update to that. It was with somewhat of an undertone that if I think most of you are aware, but Chaska's planning a pretty significant upgrade to their community center facilities, and so I think by concept, and this kind of what I took from the conversation, I have a sense that I think I mentioned this previously at a council meeting. I think Chaska is gonna be looking for a systemic change to this agreement in the future based on their level of investment. And so I mentioned that in the memo to the council is, should the council decide to move forward with this at year-end 2027, I think now, whether it starts tonight or through conversations as we go through future long-term plans or strategic plans, there's definitely a fork in the road for the council to kind of decide a path on continuing with this partnership in whatever degree and whatever additional resources it may be, or moving that type of service kind of back in-house and then having a pretty large discussion on recreation facilities, indoor facilities, etc., what that may or may not look like. Because it doesn't appear like this model that we're operating under will be sufficient for Chaska moving forward. Again, that's, I would say, part factual, part my anticipation based on conversations I had. So the only change that we're proposing, and this was, instead of having Chaska propose a model, we wanted to try it out. We proposed a model from the staff side to recognize our increasing population, but also kind of just regular CPI adjustments. And so using kind of a really formulaic approach, our increase in population based on that annual Met Council estimate, and then the 3% in adjustment. And so we actually programmed in our 2024 budget the same amount, that $79,881, and then we would use that same formula approach through what we're proposing year-end 2027. Wanting to get some feedback from the council before placing this on a future agenda.
So just to be clear, the 79,000 is our calculation to Chaska?
Correct.
Okay. What is the benefit that a resident here receives for that discounted rate? Do we know what that is in dollars? I pay this versus the non-resident rate?
Yeah, it'll vary by what the amenity is, or so it'll be whether it's a membership.
So let's just take a membership. Do we know that?
I can pull it up here.
I'm just dividing the number of residents into that $80,000. And if you don't have the answer, that's fine. But
No, as we're talking, I can pull it up.
Any other questions or comments while we're?
I think, well, we know that this agreement is not high on my list of things that we do. I have had many discussions with the rest of the council about how I think this is approached, and I know that it is something that is used. I think that as we talk about Chaska and their upgrades, knowing the history of how these fees have raised over the years and their philosophy on equity to their own taxpayers in Chaska, they were going to see a huge jump in what they're going to want as a contribution, a subsidy from the city. So I think do think it's worth looking at what might happen here in Carver if we start planning for our own and start planning for our own community center. Couldn't even imagine what that vision would look like at this point. But when we're looking at spending, right now $80,000 a year, if we start adding up all the years that we've been putting money towards Chaska, towards the community center, the reason this burns me a little bit is because we pay them, and then they're also receiving the fees from the people who are paying to go there. So I feel like they're making out pretty well on this deal. Now we don't have anything, especially now that we don't have a gym here, to even host a lot of the things that they can do. But I think it's probably time to start looking to have something coincide with when our rates are probably going to jump higher, that we start looking at something for ourselves.
I know you feel that way. So I think we are in a good place through 2027, right?
Yeah, should you move forward with
Should we
this?
move forward with this? I think that $80,000 a year, even $100,000 a year, is more economical and is being a better steward of taxpayers' money than I mean, I don't know that we can get a brand new community center for $8 million. It's probably double that and staffing it. And I just don't think that we're at our point of growth in the city of Carver. And I don't know that that's not on the top of my priority list. I don't think that that's something that's needed in the city of Carver. I've heard more from residents on one-off amenities that they're excited about, splash pad, local events that I think we're getting or we are planning for. Dog park, I've heard a lot about, all of those are in our near, potentially term future. So I'm comfortable with this. I'm comfortable with this going forward. I'm comfortable with this through 2027. I think I appreciate your gut check and what your tummy's telling you, but I think we have to wait and see because there are a lot of variables on the Chaska side too, right? Politics, who's sitting in those chairs, and how they move forward with improvements. It probably certainly needs a little bit of an upgrade at the community center, but the ball is in their court. Did I have the sports analogy? Center.
Pickleball?
Oh, well, pickleball, that's another one that I hear a lot from folks, and we're checking that box. So I don't know that we need a gym when we've got folks going to different places already. I don't know that we need a swimming pool when both of those people can go somewhere else. It's not on my list of top priorities.
I had, before the meeting, my one comment was gonna be, what I do like and what I don't like about the memorandum of understanding is that it's 4 years. But I do see in the first term, or the first paragraph, that within like 120 days. So for that reason, I'm comfortable that we would be able, if it was something not in the budget, or we just weren't in the same philosophy of the direction they were going, that we have that ability to get out after with a 120-day notice. And then I just did some quick math. So if it was 6,000 people times $14, that's about 84,000.
Last time I did math.
We're
yeah.
still
I
talking
did here.
about
I did longhand.
33%.
Yeah.
It's 33%, yeah.
0.33.
So I feel comfortable with that dollar amount that we projected to be for 2024.
And the reason I asked is I want to be sure that what we're spending is of value, beyond, let's say, giving vouchers to city residents to just get a discount at non-resident rates. So with the number of users we have at the community center, curling center, and the Chaskatown course, if the benefit Carver residents receive is equal to or greater than $79,000, that's fine with me. I just, again, if vouchers were a better return on those dollars, we'd be looking at that. Christie's comments about the future, though. Yeah, at some point, I think we do start thinking about that. It isn't going to happen in 24 or 25, but we should, I think it's reasonable to consider what the future looks like and bringing some programs back to Carver. I'm really happy about things like the splash pad and other amenities we're adding. But as the city grows, I think it's a reasonable pursuit to look at what the city does on its own. So I don't disagree with Christie there. I think that's worth looking at. But today, as long as the value is there, as long as we're getting $80,000 of value, I'm fine with it.
Eric, I have a question. The voucher, was that just an idea? Or
That's just an
do you feel
idea,
other
right?
cities?
So-
Okay.
So we provide a benefit to Carver residents that want to join the Chaska Community
Okay.
Center. If we had half that number, then it would seem like it would be a better program to join at a non-resident rate and get some
I
kind
didn't know
of
if it was a
revenue.
model you had seen somewhere.
Assuming that
Okay.
Chaska would play along with that.
Well,
Do they have?
Chaska has non-resident
Resident
rates.
rates.
We're just giving our
Yeah.
residents some credit.
Passing it down.
Right, but
Yeah.
assuming that they would have to probably be partners in that, because I don't think we could
Assuming.
our own, like, you are now a resident.
Yeah.
Pick up your passes at City Hall. Read.
Yeah, I guess I think currently the partnership provides more service than we can provide on our own, but I mean, just quick math, the numbers, if it keeps growing 10%, by the end, it's starting to get into the over 120,000 years. That, again, that seems like that starts spending a lot of money where could we, you know,
Still
the
less than a
benefit.
$10 million.
Still less than 10 million, exactly. But then, you know, what's our population in 4 years? So I think it's the most cost effective, and it does provide, like I said, more benefit to the Kerr residents than we could provide on our own. And it doesn't seem horribly lopsided, right? I mean, just a quick math we did. It's about in the ballpark, right? It's not like we're subsidizing $20,000 or $30,000 per, right? I mean, we just did the quick math and we figured we're, you know, not, yeah, reasonable, I guess is what I'm.
I think I hear the majority saying, yes, this is good for 2024.
Oh, I'm absolutely fine with this
Okay,
for 2024.
okay.
I'm talking a long-range view here,
Oh,
is to say,
okay.
if there comes to a point where we have to look at, let's do our stuff here in Carver and stop having people leave Carver to go do things. But that's a ways out, but I don't think it should be something that we don't keep in that mind's eye way out there.
City manager report. We're doing better on time than I thought we'd be when we talked so much about transit early on.
Yes. Get this fired up. So a couple of pieces. Just a reminder that at your next work session, we're going to be doing the 10-year long-term financial plan. So we're going to try to get that out a little bit sooner to you, just knowing that there's a lot of information for you to take. But we're going to be having our friends Jessica Green and Tammy Amdahl from Northland Securities present that. So there'll be a report, but there'll also be kind of a PowerPoint summary. And so we're really going to be taking as much time as frankly you need to do that. And so even though we have some other things planned for that meeting, we're kind of anticipating that the work session is going to, you know, probably be almost all that long-term financial plan, and we might have some other items that kind of work into the regular meeting. Conservation area signage, so you can see that around the community for the last several years we've had this sign up, kind of just letting people know that these are either stormwater pond areas or just kind of other areas kind of maintained by the city. Basically kind of a private property line, if you will. We don't have any connected ordinances or policy language, and the longer that those signs have been up, the more questions that we've had related to, can I put a bird feeder there, or there's a tree, can I plant a tree in this area, or can I take out some buckthorn or pull out this one tree that kind of is a nuisance. And so as that's gone on, we've finally developed kind of a concept of let's kind of connect some of this, even though it started off as a communication piece. Let's connect this through maybe some simple language that as our team gets questions from residents that we can communicate. It's not a typical conservation area, which I think is part of the issue that we're going to have to try to unpack. When folks see conservation area, I think they immediately think of DNR conservation areas and pristine. And frankly, we have kind of different areas where this same signage is used. And so with Aaron Schmidt, Aaron Smith, Chad, Dan Lannis, we're going to be working on kind of developing a policy or regulations that let the team know, because we get these questions kind of from all over the place. So we can have consistent messaging, and it's frankly what we're messaging is something that the council supports in application. So, any questions on those first two items?
Those are always put on property lines, right?
They're not. They're not put on property. They're put on property lines, but only when there's like a stormwater area or outlots, etc.
Okay.
And then, as you know, and we've kind of messaged out, we had a vendor printing error related to our utility bills, so I just asked Lynn to provide an update to the council and to be available for any questions.
So yes, we sent out our initial batch of utility bills, and what happened is there was a vendor printing error, as Brent mentioned. The name on the bill did not match the correct address of that homeowner. Luckily, we were able to retrieve about 5 large boxes of the bills from the postmaster. So we haven't had as many calls as we thought. The good news also is that residents are able to, and were able to retrieve their bills on Invoice Cloud. Those are correct because we pushed out the correct information to everybody. It's just the vendor got some columns mixed up, and I apologize for that. But we did send out new bills to all residents, and everybody who's called or that we've talked to has been very understanding. So, but we have a really good process in place for this moving forward, so I don't suspect that it will happen again. So,
Is there a way to tell the difference between the new bill and the old bill, other than if the name and address are correct?
yep, nope, that would be it.
Okay.
Yeah, just making sure that the name and the address is absolutely where you live, so.
How many days later did the next mailing hit the post office boxes? Or the
It was the
mailbox.
next day.
Oh, so it was that quickly, so the,
Or wait, it was, well, they were dropped off like on a Thursday, but they didn't get in the boxes until Monday the 30th. And then he actually came and dropped them off on Monday the 30th, so
okay, so there was maybe a day or two wait time?
that's exactly right.
It wasn't bad. I got the notification of the errant bill on Monday, and I can't remember when I got mine, but it was.
Yeah, I got
very
two
last
also,
week.
but I couldn't remember how far apart they
So,
came.
Yeah,
it
it
was
was just kind
But
of.
you did a great job. The errant bill didn't end up in my mailbox. I asked my neighbor, she didn't get one
Oh.
either.
It's
so
just weird how they
I
were
got
able to
it.
pull some, and then some of them made it, so I apologize.
Oh, no, it was funny, cause I had just, like, got the message that it happened, and I just pulled out the mailer, like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, it's not me.
But it
Yep.
might have been the downtown post office boxes where they did it.
Yep.
Oh, for sure.
Whatever.
Yeah, so we're all learning, everybody's learning.
And then the last piece, this is, something that Lynn earmarked, is the overall kind of concern in this kind of last quarter of the year. There's still a possibility that we could hit building permit revenues for the 2023 budget. But there is a noticeable, I would say, reduction in what we've seen to date. And so Lynn and I are working on some adjustments, and we feel like we can make that whole without too big of an impact to the overall 23 budget. But thinking about the 24 budget, although we're anticipating and we have the plans in for the CDA's apartment project, which would be a major revenue generator, we also received word from Lennar that they're pushing back construction of their 4th phase to the spring, which ultimately then, delays the availability of lots. Now, that said, they connected with Aaron Smith late this afternoon and said they're applying for their final plat for the 5th edition yet this year. And so what that means is they'll probably construct the 4th and 5th phase together. But in the end, I think the combination of kind of hearing some of this news, interest rates, I think we're all kind of reading and hearing about kind of the instability of that market. And in the end, most of our revenues, we have a pretty great deal of certainty on what those numbers are going to be based on historical trends, etc., new legislation. The building permit revenues, there's this spectrum of we don't want to be in a position where we're under budgeting it to any great degree, because I think showing revenues that much higher than actual costs brings unwanted attention from the building trades that we're somehow making money or profiting from our building permit revenues. And so in the last few years, we went from a more conservative outlook on that to what we thought was a more realistic one. But when you do that, you put a little bit more pressure on hitting those numbers. So what we'd like to do is kind of draw that back, and as I'm sharing this kind of narrative that we're going to try to find that sweet spot, but that's going to be an ongoing challenge for us. And so we've developed a concept that we'd like to present to the council related to some budget adjustments which would show up in Lynn's truth and taxation presentation, but we wanted to check in on this. So the two bigger projects and then some miscellaneous. The 3rd Street Bridge project is planned for 2024, but the actual construction would happen after Steamboat Days, which would then lend itself to tell you that the project is going to happen over 2024 and 2025. And so because of that, the schedule for the project timing and construction, we believe we can fund that over 2 years. And, one of the big philosophic changes in the 2024 budget was using local government aid as not as a kind of a revenue source, but dedicating it towards capital. And so this is a little bit of a departure of that, but I also think that rather than going kind of completely cold turkey from that, making a $50,000 adjustment and using that local government aid for that doesn't put us in significant harm's way. And then the unallocated capital fund, reducing that down to 0. If we do end up with a surplus from the general fund in 2024, you could reallocate as the council all $70,000 of that money back. But we didn't want to be in a position where we allocated that through a budget expenditure with no kind of dedicated fund or expenditure in 24, but not having that matching revenue. And then the miscellaneous budget adjustments are, basically just a typical series of budget changes that you'll get from the preliminary to the final. And so we did get our health insurance back at, I think, 9.5, and we budgeted for 10, but we also got some workman's comp insurance increases. I talked to Lynn, and just based on how we're seeing the transition going between Brenda Apta's position and Christine's, we were scaling back the account transition down to like 2 weeks, I think we have it. Then there's just some other kind of minor things that, tweak $500 here, $200 there, so that ultimate change was about $18,762. That includes that change to that administrative services position. We also decreased our part-time budget for administrative assistant from like 23,000 down to 19,000. That was another example. Just thinking that we're probably not going to need that type of budget based on the hours that we're thinking we might bring that person on. So ultimately, those series of changes would allow you to decrease your revenue budget for building permit fees from 700 down to 561, which we think is a more manageable number heading into 2024. So looking for some feedback if you feel comfortable with Lynn and I adjusting the truth and taxation budget documents to reflect these changes.
Is that 561 number in line with building permit revenue that we're anticipating for 2023?
I would say yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get the threat that the building trades and their associations bring to us making too much money. But we're looking at 2 years, right, where we didn't quite meet our targets for building revenue. So I think we have that as part of our story, and that's the catalyst for us to say, well, we need to skinny this down a little bit. So I am in favor of this. I would rather us be talking about this now than next September, October, November, and be like, we're gonna come short and we gotta figure out a way. Like, I'm comfortable talking about this now, I'm comfortable with these changes, and I think that this will put us in a more favorable position to address some of the challenges that we might be facing with building permit revenue next year.
And then just kind of one additional piece, Lynn put this together. So the reductions to that revenue budget, depending upon your point of view, and ultimately the council will make this choice, but it lessens your ability to then reduce the property tax revenue stream unless you took some of that. So I just wanted to give you some line of sight to what the preliminary tax rates look like. And so there's some cities that have different approaches here, like Hamburg traditionally will, levy a real higher number and come down, 20 to 30%. But you can see how we stack up we called some of the counties from your peer cities for Carver, and that the tax information that we have for Carver County is only because we're a member or a city in the county, but we can't get this information for Hennepin County and the other counties yet until probably middle to late November. So we'll be able to have that data for your truth in taxation presentation, but we do have the information for Carver County cities today.
So has this changed from the last one that we saw? And by what amount? What is it, the change?
Our tax rate hasn't changed, but all of the other cities, we didn't know their rates.
Okay, so ours is
Yep,
staying
yes,
from where it was,
yes.
okay.
Yeah, this is what you saw in September. What you see now is what the rest of the cities'
Okay,
tax rates.
okay, that's right, because we couldn't get that all, that's
Mhm.
right. All right.
So for the new guy, so what's the unallocated capital? Is that,
So it's, we have a series of capital improvements going forward through the 10-year plan. We don't have any debt, so you're basically putting $70,000 into a savings account.
gotcha, okay,
You don't have any purchases for 2024, but it'll help you, let's say in 2026, that you don't have to put more into the savings account to make that bigger purchase, because
Gotcha.
you have a little seed money in that
gotcha, okay,
savings
that
account.
makes sense.
It's in line with our strategic plan.
Yeah, no, that
We
makes
wanna
sense. Okay.
Save more and.
Right,
all
yeah,
this.
exactly. The plus side though is, right, if we undershoot on the permits and it's higher, we could obviously put money back into that, right? Versus
Yes.
if we had allocated it and
Correct.
missed, it was more,
Correct.
okay, that makes sense to
I support this. I have one clarifying question. So for that unallocated capital fund, when it says year end, does that mean like December 2024?
No, so we'll have the December 31st of 2024. We won't know what that kind of final year number
Okay.
is until the audit in the spring of 25.
Okay,
And then
so
you'll
you
get
find
a-
out in the spring of 25, and then staff would ask for council direction on.
Yep. So I think it'd be a similar process in years past. We were given a number for the special capital fund of, let's say, $80,000 was added. In the spring of 25, let's just say it was that same 80,000, we'd say, okay, council, we have a budget surplus of 80,000. Do you want it in future building capital? Do you want it in parks capital? Do you want it in equipment? Do you want it in unallocated? But we'll give you some options in the fund balances, and you can choose where you'd like to.
Okay, so the books closed end of December 2024, then after the audit spring, find out if there is any, what it is, and then council's asked to give direction.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Again, just for the new guy, did we have any surplus from 2022 into 2023?
No.
No,
Primarily.
okay, yeah, no,
because
this
of the
makes
building
it really
improvements.
important, okay, no, this makes total sense to me then.
You know, the other piece that we're trying to be mindful of is, we have a fund balance policy that says we're gonna keep 40% of we're gonna have in our, basically savings account, 40% of our operational funds. Correct.
Sure, okay.
And so if we continue to have budget deficits, that number will dip below 40, and then we'll be in an unenviable position where you'll have to actually budget to get it out for a line item to bring that number back up to 40. So, again, further out, but we want to be mindful of that because we had talked about this with the mayor, before. We don't want to be in a position where we have a line item that just basically is trying to bring our fund balance up.
Sure.
That's really not fun. Yeah. See anything?
Nope, I'm good.
I'm good.
All right. All right. Go, you somewhere?
Yeah, that's how you-
Look at the timing. That just means we can't have any council requests. No, actually, new council requests.
I have a quick one, just,
It better be quick.
yes. With the Southwest Transit, there was an email that came, and it maybe wasn't the first time the email came in, but it was about this upcoming Thursday, something transit related, from Margaret Donahue, the Transportation Alliance, and I noticed, Mr. Eric Hansen's name on it, and it's this Thursday.
So that's one of the
Right,
commissions
Commissions.
that Eric and I.
okay, and then I just had noted that you had said you were going to, I think, Saturday, so I'm like, oh, I wonder if he knows about this.
All-day workshop Saturday.
That sounds
Okay,
really.
do you know about the Thursday event?
Not
I'll
attending
get
that.
it forwarded to Brent so he can,
It's not,
Or-
that's not in.
That's not,
It's in Mankato.
It's in Mankato.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not.
okay.
it's not connected with Southwest
I,
Transit.
right,
Oh,
but just kind of that category, but
Yep.
maybe in a future one you might wanna go.
Okay, and if there isn't anything else, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to
A
adjourn.
motion by Councilmember Frischman,
I'll second.
and a second by Councilmember Mock. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
I'm super happy